and want to once again thank all of you who are returning, and for those of you that are checking us out for the first time, want to thank you and welcome you as well. We know there's a time of year, and we really appreciate everybody carving out some time to join us for what appears to be a very popular topic, and we're excited to have a presenter that has not been able to join us on the series. We finally locked her down, and I'll be introducing her in just a bit. But this month we'll be focusing our title and training around labor, blockchain, and legislation, and talking about 7 factors impacting food safety in the next 7 years. And we've had a lot of questions and feedback about labor challenges, blockchain, legislation, so kind of these higher level strategic things. And we were lucky enough to get the perfect presenter for this, Dr. Jennifer van der Leijt from the University of Minnesota, who really has some great insight and some great content around what you can be thinking about for your facilities in this area. So I think a great opportunity to kind of take a step back today and look at the strategic side of what we're all doing. As I mentioned, this is our monthly webinar and podcast series. This is designed to be kind of an in the trenches approach to helping all of our fellow practitioners, where we bring in best practices, different strategies, talk about trends, regulations, and do that from the likes of which is some of the best experts, thought leaders, and consultants that are out there doing it with you. And so if you are new, we appreciate you joining us and checking it out. And for those that are returning and keeping this community continuing to grow, which is so exciting, we're really proud to present this, and we want to encourage you. We do these for you and with you. So please share ideas about topics and presenters, and we'll keep them coming. As I mentioned, we're really pleased and honored to sponsor this, and feel this is a great way to keep serving our community of FSQA professionals. And you'll hear a lot about strategy today. We talk a lot about other areas that are more tactical in nature, but at the bottom line of a lot of these is an ability to execute all of them a little easier and faster and better using technology, and that's where we come in. So we certainly always welcome the opportunity to learn about what you're doing and how our technology might be able to help with our food quality management system, whether it's in the food safety side, food quality, or even on supplier compliance. And we've got some really exciting new things coming out as well, so encourage you to check out our website at safetychain.com. And again, thank you guys all for supporting us. A couple of housekeeping things before we dig into the good stuff here. So one is, this is designed to be conversational. Now, there's a ton of content. I had a chance to get a sneak peek of the presentation, so we're going to pack in a lot in a short period of time. But we'll want to encourage you to ask questions, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end. I'll be monitoring those behind the scenes during the course of the webinar. But I want to make sure this is a great opportunity to get access to expertise in these areas, and encourage you to share your questions, and we'll work on those. If we don't get to all of them, don't be disappointed. One of the things that Dr. van der Leijt has offered to do is to take some of these offline if we don't get to them. So please engage with us. It makes it certainly more, most people usually have a common question, so you'll be helping more than just yourself in a lot of cases. You'll also notice when you send us questions, it's just coming to us. You'll see we're listed as the only panelists here. So you're not kind of broadcasting that to all the folks on. And I'll take care of one of the most common questions up front here, which is the recording. So yes, we are recording the webinar, and yes, we'll be sending out a link in addition to an access to the slide deck, which are both a generous offer from our presenter today. So you'll be able to rewatch it or share it with your colleagues in the office there. And last but not least, we're on a webinar tool. Sometimes these can, get a little wonky. So if you're having any challenges with audio, you can use the chat box to message us. We'll do our best to help you out there. If not, just note there's always an option to switch from phone to computer audio or vice versa. So usually that's a quick, easy fix, kind of like the old just turn the computer on and off deal there with IT, right? So with that, we want to dig into the meat here and introduce our presenter today, who we're really delighted to have and quite lucky. I'm sure many of you have seen or heard Dr. Vanderlight speak, very much out on the speaking tour and has quite the background here. For those of you that aren't as familiar, Dr. Jennifer Vanderlight, she spent quite a bit of time in regulatory affairs at Cargill for over 16 years. I think one of the more fascinating things about her is that she holds more than 130 global patents for ingredients processing technology. So has a very interesting perspective from that side of the house. And now she's the Director of Integrated Food Systems Leadership Program at the University of Minnesota, which I think a lot of you have heard of and are familiar with. And she's also serving as the Associate Director at the Food Protection and Defense Institute. So with that, Jennifer, I want to make sure you can hear us okay and want to welcome you. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today. I want to emphasize what Brian said about asking questions. I love questions, and if you have the question, I am absolutely positive that someone else has the question, but if you're willing to write it down and ask it, it means you're the bravest person in the room.
Agreed. Well, with that, let's turn it over to you here and let's go have some fun.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about 7 factors that are going to impact food safety in the next 7 years. There we go. So first, before we really get started into those 7 factors, let's talk a little bit about sort of where food safety is today. So food safety is really about system reliability. We all know in the food safety world that there are regular incidents with food safety, and that there are a lot of regulations, and that food safety is really a globally recognized part of the food industry. Brian, I'm having trouble with the slides.
Okay, no problem. I can advance it for you.
Okay. Just as an example of that, global foodborne illness in the world still causes almost 500,000 deaths per year, 600 million cases. In the U.S., it's much less than that. We have a more established food safety system that helps us quite a bit. Today, food safety, there is a global, it's global, but it's reactive. The Food Safety Modernization Act and the Preventive Control Rule, it's taking it to that more proactive approach, but we're not there yet. Food safety is highly focused on hygiene, really around 5 focal points. 5 different bacterial organisms are really the main focus. However, right now we have a lot of paper-based records. And that does impact our ability to move forward more quickly in the food safety realm.
We move that forward for you? Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it works and then it doesn't. Oh, went too far. There's a lot of regulation in the area, but even though we have these challenges in food safety and we are still having a lot of food safety incidents today, Dr. Gottlieb, the previous FDA commissioner, did mention in February of this year that FDA recalls are at a 5-year low. Most of you may not realize that, because although the recall number is much lower than it has been in the past, FDA also increased its communication about those recalls. So when you're following the news, it seems like there's one every day, but they're actually, on total number, there's less than there has been in the past. But we also have to think about food security. So WHO actually defined what food security means, and it talks about people having access to sufficient, safe, nutritious food to maintain a healthy and active lifestyle. The key here, and I'm going to have Brian's help again, The key here is about access to safe food. So if we're going to have a food secure world and feed 10 billion people by the year 2050, we're going to have to focus and continue our focus on food safety. And we also have to realize that what got us here, what got us to the food safety status that we have right now in the world and in the U.S., won't actually get us there. And that's why we're going to talk about the 7 factors that will impact us over the next 7 years.
Jennifer, you want me to, it must be there's probably a delay on that. Do you want me to just go ahead and advance these for you?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to, and I will just pause and let you advance.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate everybody's patience as we,
Yep.
looks like there's a lag on it. So there you go.
Oh, there it went. That's okay. We're not going to rebuild that. So it's a little much on the screen right now, but we're going to talk about the environment, labor dynamics, policy, technology, consumers, logistics, and the media, and how each of those are going to influence our food safety paradigm over the next few years. First up is the environment. Global warming is an issue that we are currently struggling with around the world. Crop yields will be impacted with climate change, as will disease status and extreme weather events. So when we think about how climate change is going to impact our food safety, we also have to realize that over 80% of our internationally reported disasters are climate related. When you have a climate related disaster, tornado, flood, hurricane, drought, that impacts our ability to produce food. It creates things like mycotoxins and disease, and all of those will actually come in and impact our ability to deliver safe food. Brian?
Yep. Are you not seeing the updates there?
I am not.
Okay. I think there's a bad lag on the sharing there.
Oh, there they go. Brian, on the ones next, why don't you just go ahead and build them completely out?
Okay. Yep.
And I'll just try to talk through them.
Yep. Sounds good. No problem.
Sure. We will also have to deal with disease pressure. So as climate shifts and as water stress increases, and the red areas show where there will be extreme water stress in the next few years, this also creates disease pressure both on our crops and on our animals. As we get disease pressure in the crops and the animals, that impacts the safety profile of those incoming inputs into the food production system and may end up needing to change how you think about food safety within each of your production facilities. For example, one of the most recent examples was how the romaine lettuce last year was affiliated with an E. coli 0157 outbreak. That's related to irrigation and how the irrigation water was contaminated with E. coli. So as the environment shifts, it's going to put different pressures that then can actually impact specifically in your production facilities the ability to deliver safe food.
Okay.
Sure, technology is the other big area, one of the other big areas that's going to affect our ability to have safe food over the next 7 years. Things like biotechnology and the microbiome and the Internet of Things are coming online and will impact how we manage, treat, trace food safety issues. For example, on the left side, the larger figure was published by the World Economic Forum this year, and it really talks about the transformation that 12 different technologies will have on the effect of our food system. Some of those may not actually impact food safety, and why I focused on 7. But biotechnology, things like food sensing technologies, how sensors can impact production line and manufacturing, how Internet of Things, many of your food manufacturing equipment is likely linked to digital mechanisms that help you be more real-time supply and control your production from remote locations. The microbiome is a really interesting area that's developing, and how you can use the microbiome in the environment to help control food safety pathogens, and how the use of sanitizing agents and hygiene agents are affecting the microbiome in the facilities, which may lead to resistance genes in pathogens that are in bacteria that may not currently be recognized as pathogens. One of the other big things that's happening on the technology front, and this is where Safetychain is also a lead, is digitalization. So with our move from paper-based records to digital records, that really helps us move smart solutions forward much faster. So recently in the global forum, one of the global initiatives is that things like electrophytosanitary certificates are actually helping facilitate agri-food trade and regulatory cooperation. So the ability to transmit those records more quickly are helping move our food around the world more quickly. Which brings us to logistics. So when you eventually digitalize the food system and the food supply chain, you can start utilizing things like blockchain technology, which can help trace foods from farm to fork. It can allow consumers to see where produce or animals are grown. It can help you have better just-in-time and global supply nature. All of those will actually help. Remember, we talked about food security as integral as well. Food loss is a major issue around the globe right now in our quest to feed almost 10 billion people by 2050. We're wasting or losing almost 30% of the food that is currently produced around the world. So things like blockchain technology, digital records, and improving the efficiency of our global supply chain will help us directly address that food loss, so more of that food ends up in the hands of consumers.
Looks like it's coming there. There's another delay on their system. Thanks for everyone's patience. I'm not sure what's going on the webinar side, but it looks like it's just pausing the views for everybody every few seconds or 30 seconds or so.
Sure. If we start up the upper left, playing on what we just said about food waste and food loss, there is enough food loss and wasted currently in the world that we could feed an additional 2 billion people. So when we talk about food security, remember, safe food is absolutely essential in food security. We're trying to move from 7.5 billion people in the world today to almost 10 billion by 2050. If we could recover safely and use the amount of food that is currently lost or wasted, we could almost reach the goal of feeding that 10 billion in 2050 without increasing food production around the world. That's great because that will help us preserve the world. One of the key challenges going forward is feeding the world without destroying it. Consumers play a big part in that. In the lower left, there are two graphs there. The one on the left that is more blue talks about how meat consumption is going to change over the next several years. And the one on the right, which is more white, is total food production. And what you can see is consumer preference there is that areas like Sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East and Near Asia, they're going to increase their amount of food consumption a bit, 30%, 20%, but the amount that they're going to actually increase their meat production is much higher. So you're going to have shifting dynamics and understanding how to safely prepare and ship foods into these regions which may not become familiar or have the infrastructure to do things like cold chain transportation will be of growing importance moving forward. Moving to the circle and thinking about how that impacts the food loss and food waste issue. Consumers right now in wealthier countries, so first world countries, the US, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Consumers in these wealthy countries are currently wasting almost as much food as the entire food production in sub-Saharan Africa. And as we think about how to deliver food and recover this waste food, food safety will have to remain in the forefront. We also have a growing pet population globally. In the past, pet foods have primarily been dried pet foods, kibble. Consumers are now demanding different foods for their animals. So what does that mean to you from a food safety perspective? If you have an animal in your home, or any of your family or friends have an animal in their home, that impacts the food that you provide to that animal, actually impacts the food safety in the home. As these pet owners are moving more and more towards raw diets, more unprocessed diets, you have the ability to introduce food safety pathogens into the home. Most recently, in the past year, we've had several outbreaks of salmonella infections, salmonellosis, in humans that are directly related to feeding raw pet foods in the home. And then we also, as each and every one of us are consumers, we have a responsibility within our own homes as well. And even if we do a perfect job in the food system, in the food industry, manufacturing safe foods, and they are safe when food safety has been addressed when they leave our warehouse or our dock to go to the consumer, there is still a lot of education that we all need to think about to the consumer population. Many consumers don't understand the basics of food safety principles, things like cleaning and separating and cooking to a temperature, not just a time, and correct storage conditions and how long food can sit out. And consumers are still making choices that put them at risk for foodborne illness, such as eating undercooked ground beef. And that does, when consumers get sick, it does have an impact on the food industry. So whenever we have an opportunity to talk about food safety with our friends and our family and our colleagues, I would highly encourage everyone to do that, especially as food safety professionals. One impact that is not talked about very much right now from a food safety perspective is labor. Labor is currently at an all-time low, especially in the U.S. And in many places around the world as well. And yet, 28% of the global population is directly or indirectly employed by agriculture. Think about that. A third of the population around the world is directly or indirectly employed by agriculture. As the labor shortage grows, the immediate impact that that's having in our production facilities and in our food system is we're having to rely on more temporary and day labor. Many of our food production processes are quite labor intensive. When we don't have labor, we turn to things like mechanization. Mechanization is great. It allows us to harvest a lot of food in a quick amount of time, but it also changes the food safety profile of that food. So if you're using manual labor to process, there are food safety risks that are affiliated with that, and we've been controlling those for a long time. But as our incoming ingredients may be processed more through mechanization, we have different types of food safety risks that are coming in. So for example, the picture on the far right in the corner, in the lower corner, is an automatic harvester of produce. That's likely picking up soil. And so cleaning soil and understand the microbial ecology of the soil, that could be introducing different pathogens into our production system than, say, the manual labor in the middle picture. The other reason that the labor shortage is impacting specifically food is conditions in the food and agriculture segment are sometimes not optimal. And as people are looking for better types of employment, they often leave the agricultural sector, which puts further pressure on labor. I think we're missing one piece in this one,
Oh,
Brian.
you're right. There it is. It's getting hung up there, but it'll be there in just a second. I guess the good news is we got so many people calling in here. Maybe it's loading their system.
Right. Which brings me to my favorite topic of all, is training. So as this labor shortage continues and is likely to continue into the future, training those temporary and day laborers is going to be incredibly important. So especially in those facilities that have a large, more transient workforce. If you think about the effort that it takes to train an employee to be able to operate in a food safe manner, there's so much training that you have to do in the food industry. There's training on food safety, there's training on worker safety, there's training on just what the job itself is. And when you have temporary and day laborers, you have to make choices about how much training is actually provided. And that does have an impact on food safety. So creating training and development programs that can bring these frontline workers up to speed much more quickly and really focus on the high level. The most important training first is going to be essential, and making that training much more accessible and easy to deliver will be an important focus over the next 7 years.
It's going to get there, I promise.
Yep, there it is.
It's the reveal.
So after labor, I'm going to talk about policy for just a moment. And I know policy is one of those words that lots of people are like, oh, can I just go take a nap now? I'm tired of thinking about policy. Policy in the food safety arena is so incredibly important. We just talked about labor. So policy related to things like immigration and bringing in foreign workers under temporary visas is essential. Many of our farm workers are actually undocumented, as much as 60%, with the most recent information that's available on that. So things that are happening at the national and the international level with immigration and how migrant communities are moving around the world will impact our food safety. Because if we can have a more stable population of workers and we can actually get them trained in and know that they can then be with us for a longer period of time, it helps us improve our food safety posture within the food system. Other things like FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, is another policy mechanism helping us move from a reactive food safety system into a more proactive food safety system. FSMA is not the only one. There are also new food safety regulations in Canada, in the EU, in China, in Australia, New Zealand. And because of the global nature of food systems, many of you are likely already producing foods that are going to be shipped to those countries, and your companies are responsible for abiding by their regulations as well. So understanding that this food safety policy environment is shifting is going to be essential for how you think about your role in the coming years. Other things that are affecting the food safety system are things like tariffs. As tariffs are being applied across the globe, the way and the manner and the countries from which we source our foods are very different. The U.S. is a huge exporter of food, but we're also a huge importer of food. I live in Minnesota, and I love mangoes. Mangoes do not grow in Minnesota. But as these tariffs are being shifted around the world, the mangoes that are coming to Minnesota may be coming from different countries than they used to come from, and that could have an impact on food safety. So understanding how these are moving is really important. And then finally, as you think about policy and feeding the future in food safety, The food industry as a whole is incredibly innovative. We are learning how to use parts of foods that have not traditionally been used as food. So that upper right-hand picture on this slide is actually cocoa. And one of the new foods that's coming out of, we all know cocoa beans, but those pods have a lot of pulp in them. And food manufacturers are learning how to use that cocoa pulp. But that means that you have to go through a registration process to have that approved as a food ingredient. In many countries around the world, the EU, the US, Australia, New Zealand, they are changing the standards by which those new foods are approved, primarily to assure that all of those foods are safe. But that also then impacts in understanding how each of your own companies are addressing these new and novel foods, are using traditional foods in new and novel ways, what impact that has on your manufacturing process and how to assure that those remain safe will be really important in the next 7 years. And to tie it all together, we have media. So in the current climate, with particularly with the rise of fake news, and just not understanding or when news may be presented as reputable and it may not be, the rise of folks that are trying to spread misleading information and things like that, the media is really super important, because if the wrong message gets out, it creates vulnerabilities to each and every one of our brands. And once the brand is damaged, whether it's because it was legitimate news and it was real, or whether it's because it's fake, it's hard to recover from that. But each of the other 6 factors that I've talked about, you can go ahead and advance, Brian, or if you have, it's still loading.
There you go.
Yeah, each and every one of those other factors, the environment, the labor, the policy, the media, they all flow, oh, not media, the policy, the technology, they all flow through media. We're learning about all of them through the way that the media interacts with them, and understanding how different parts of the community and different parts of the consumer and the media spectrum are talking about these issues is going to be really important. If we just take, I'll pick a hot topic today, immigration. There are there are several different messages on immigration that are out there, ranging from it's essential for for us to be able to function as a food industry, to we need to close the borders and not let any immigrants in this country. Somewhere in the middle is probably where we need to be. But understanding how the media influences people's perceptions, and that can be said for biotechnology. Think about the GMO, genetically modified organism debate, and how different people believe different things about biotechnology. Think about the conversations about global warming. So when we think about how these factors are going to impact us over the next 7 years, we have to realize that as we use them in our own job, and as we communicate about them to our coworkers, our friends, and our family, we're all being influenced by the way that the media presents them to us. And the interesting thing about that is that same interaction happens with food safety. So, for example, if an immigration policy shifts, that changes my labor dynamics. My labor dynamics may actually impact the way that I can use digitalization in my plant because of the training aspect. You can create and you can understand how they're all independent, and yet they're all interrelated. So if I have an extreme weather event that changes the ability to source my ingredient from Chile, we'll say, I've now disrupted my just-in-time delivery system. So where else can I find that ingredient? And how does that impact my food safety? Is it traceable? Can I use blockchain to trace it? What are the policies? Am I allowed to import from that country? So they end up being all interrelated. So when we think about food safety in the coming years, I think it's really important for us to understand that these global pressures are shifting, and and how they interrelate will absolutely drive change in our food safety practices. But what we can do today, what we can start now, is start sowing those seeds of interdisciplinary food safety innovation. So what do I mean by that? As you're talking in and around your network, in your company, in your peer group, make a point of talking to people that are not like yourself. So it might be talking to the operations person. It might be talking to people, some of the temporary and day laborers, to understand what their concerns are and what you could do to help them be a longer term employee. Might not be within your scope. And you have to think about how to do it, correctly within your own work environment. But beginning to think about how these things, do you have regulatory professionals that have an ability to communicate what they think is going to happen in the next 6, 8 months, year, 2 years, so you can begin preparing now. But learning that to be a great food safety person, you're going to have to start thinking a little bit outside your box. And I'm going to tell you what to do,
Yeah.
how to do it next when it loads.
That's the big lead in there. There you go.
There we go. That was the dramatic pause,
Yeah,
Brian.
that's the word I was looking for, the dramatic pause. Thank you.
So how do you get there? One is thinking about what type of leadership skills you bring to the workforce. Now, in my career, I have done a lot of leadership work with a lot of different stakeholders. And at one point in my career, I had a person say to me, "But I'm not a leader. I'm not like you. I'm not a leader." And my response is, everyone is a leader in your area. We just have to figure out how to tap the potential, because there are things that you do and things that you know in your work area that you know better than anyone else. And so you have the potential to lead in that area. But when we think about this really super big picture about these 7 factors in 7 years, things that you can do to help foster your own mindset and your own personal growth to work in this area, this big, hairy, nebulous, I'm not sure what to do next area, is think about that broader food system. The next time you sit down to eat, I love spaghetti. I'm obviously going to have to cook spaghetti tonight. The next time you think about spaghetti and you're having that spaghetti dinner, stop and think about, how was that spaghetti made? Where did the wheat come from? Who actually developed the wheat? How was it grown? How did it get to the pasta manufacturer? Then you can think about things about sort of your plate, or what if I'm eating it at a restaurant? How did it get to the restaurant? What kinds of food safety practices are there? And you could do the same thing with each and all of the ingredients, to think much more broadly about, how is it labeled? Why is it presented to me in this manner and not a different manner? When you start thinking about that broader food system, then you can actually start thinking about how the different aspects are interdependent upon one another. How growers, those wheat growers, are absolutely dependent upon consumer perception, and the policy and the regulations and the food manufacturing technology and the supply chain. They're all interrelated to get our food from farm to fork. The other thing is, when you think about critical and strategic thinking, those are things that many people think, well, they're hard. Those are hard. They are. They're hard. But I think we all have the ability to do them, because what critical thinking really is it's breaking down what you're working on into the key pieces to prioritize and be able to work with them easier. To work through, what are the secondary and tertiary effects? If I change this, what's going to happen down the line? And then that strategic thinking is thinking, okay, well, that's the what if scenario. If I did this, or if this happened, what do I think would happen down the line? The other leadership skill, this goes back to me recommending that each people think about moving and talking to people outside their area. Think about how you can leverage people across disciplines. One of the key areas that I work on now that's impacting the food system is the intentional adulteration rule, that last rule in FSMA, where each of the facilities will need to create food defense plans to protect against intentional adulteration for wide-scale public health harm. That will often fall in each of the facilities on food safety personnel. But if you actually look into what that rule requires, you're going to need HR to help you because many of the mitigation strategies will be people-based. You're probably going to need facility security to help you to implement technologies that are not typical in the food safety realm. You're likely going to need your operations people to help you to understand what types of mitigation strategies are going to be appropriate within the plant so that you don't disrupt how the plant functions. But thinking sort of really practically and bringing in and fostering that network across disciplines will help move you forward further and faster. Communication and decision making, learning and understanding who your audience is and communicating very succinctly in the way that they like to be addressed is really important as you move forward in this area. And then there are a lot of crucial conversations. Food safety is simply not negotiable. So learning how to have that critical conversation about this is not a food safe practice and knowing when it's completely not optional to when there might be some gray areas or ways to do it differently, but understanding how to negotiate and have those really critical conversations is absolutely important in leading in this area over the next 7 years.
All right, Jennifer. So it looks like we got to the Q&A piece. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate all that content. A lot of good stuff there. A lot of things to be thinking about. I know we've got some questions as well, and want to encourage everybody if you have anything specific. We covered a lot of ground there. In fact, I'm gonna actually try and reverse the slide here, see if I can test my luck here a little bit, because I think there was a couple of really helpful things there on that connected slide I wanted to have up while we go through a few of these questions here.
Sure.
Because I think this is the one that really hit home and kind of ties it all together. So one question I'm going to kind of summarize, but is really about, you see a lot of this, but the question really is around where do you start? How do you prepare for these impacts, right, that we're looking on here? What's your recommendation there as someone who's starting to think forward?
Yep. So how do you prepare? There's a couple different suggestions I have there, Brian. And one of the things I personally do, one, I make it a point to talk to people outside my specific area of interest. So when I go to lunch, I might talk to, one of my contacts right now that I'm learning a lot about that I never thought I would, I talk to a virus expert because viruses in the food system are an emerging threat. In the human system, in the human food system, there's norovirus and there's hepatitis. But I also work in the animal feed industry, and in that industry, viruses are not really considered, and yet we have African swine fever right now, which we're really thinking a lot about. So how do I prepare? One, talk to people that are not like yourself. Learn, just take the opportunity to engage them informally and learn about what they do and begin to make those connections for themselves. The other thing I do is I curate news feeds. It's so easy today to get into a bubble and you only hear things that are like yourself. So I have worked very diligently to curate news feeds. I use Twitter, I use Facebook, I use a lot of different places that I can agglomerate things, but I have to be really conscious to pull in sources that might disagree with me, to challenge my approach. It takes a little bit of time to set them up, but once you get them set up and you're getting the kind of information that is useful to you, reviewing them only takes about 15 minutes a day to help give you that broader viewpoint. The other thing you can do is you can actually look for specific training opportunities in this area that will help you think more about that integrated food systems approach.
Perfect. Good segue into the next question came in is it says when you do talk about training, what about reinforcing food safety culture? So I don't think we touched on that, but any
Yep.
thoughts around that with training?
Yeah, food safety culture is really super important. Food safety culture, and the other one that I will throw in there at the same time, because it's going to impact each and every person on this call, is food defense culture as well. They're similar, but a little bit different. I believe that food safety culture is absolutely essential over the next 7 years. In particular, that's at home and that's at work. So at home, I'll start there. Teaching and growing your friends and your family to understand the basic principles of food safety and to do them consistently every time, you help create awareness. Because what I know, I have kids, what I know is because we've emphasized that food safety culture at home, I actually now hear my kids and my husband, who's not a food safety person, say things to their friends and their family.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps amplify the message. In the workplace, though, it's a little bit different. We all hold each other accountable to the food safety. We all have a vested interest for our plant to have safe food every day. So being able to talk freely and do peer coaching and peer guiding and fostering, especially that sense of leadership in our upper management, is really important. And having mechanisms where people can talk about food safety issues and opportunities for improvement. I won't call them violations. They
Mm-hmm.
might be, but we'll call them opportunities for improvement so that it can be done in an open and transparent and non-retribution manner is absolutely essential as we move forward.
No, that's great. And we've heard that communication internally and getting buy-in throughout in helping you improve in all these areas you've mentioned today, I think is critical. We hear it obviously a lot on the technology side, but the culture is certainly a big one. This is a great, I think another, I'm trying to read through it. I love the questions that are coming in here, so I'm gonna try and tie them together when I can. This is a great one, came in from Robert talking about, so what about food safety distribution to consumers? Are there any recommendations? So I'm not sure if that's maybe education or training, but I think that's a nice kind of add-on to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it is. Food distribution to consumers and proper and safe handling in the consumer's hand is, I think, one of the key challenges moving forward. There are things that companies can do, but then there are also things that policy makers and other authorities are doing. So things that manufacturers are doing, some of them they're required to do, is there are safe handling instructions on many of our foods. But you do have some flexibility in how prominent those are. So as it makes sense, having those as prominent as makes sense and obviously still compliant with regulations will help us. The other thing that's happening is if you're in an area that can begin to influence policy or work with the policymakers, or even just begin to transmit it even through your own workforce and hope that word of mouth follows it. The picture that I showed about the clean, separate, cook, and chill, that's a really basic message that USDA is pushing out as a consumer education. So amplifying that anytime that we can is another great way to help build that food safety perspective in our consumers.
That's great. Good recommendations there. Question came, so this is one of the ones we talked about in our preparation and one of both our favorite topics around blockchain, and there's certainly a lot of in the media, as you talked about, and talk about all the different variations of this topic in the media. So the question, I hope Riaz, I hope that's the right proper pronunciation of your name, wrote, do you think that food companies will be forced to have blockchain technology by FDA soon? As of now, most are using some sort of ERP like SAP or others that are out there. What's your thoughts around blockchain and how that's going to evolve into the marketplace?
Oh, that is such a hard question, Brian. Okay. My thoughts on blockchain. I think blockchain is an incredible technology, but I would like to focus less on blockchain and more on digitalization, and there's a reason for that. Blockchain is one type of platform to share digital information. It may not be the only platform. What's interesting about FDA is that FDA requires access to information and availability of information, but they often, when you're talking about information flow, now I'm not talking like analytical testing methodologies, but information flow, they have not in the past required a specific mechanism or technology to do that. So the likelihood that FDA actually says it has to be blockchain, I don't see them going there. But the impact of digital solutions, I think, cannot be overemphasized. Digital records, and if you implement a blockchain, they're going to be absolutely essential. Digital records are going to be, absolutely essential, and they help us move forward and achieve food safety faster and more efficiently, especially when there is a food safety incident. The ability to access those records and not be paper-based are going to move us forward into the recall situation a whole lot faster. I don't see FDA saying that it has to be blockchain. That doesn't mean that there's not future there. I think what actually would likely happen is some of our biggest either manufacturers or retail partners will start to specify technologies that they expect their suppliers to use. So whatever technology is landed on, whether it's this blockchain or that blockchain or a different type of digital solution where food safety records can be shared across a supply chain, I think it will likely come through an industry-driven initiative rather than a regulatory-driven initiative.
Yeah, just to add my little piece to that, I think you're spot on about the digitalization is the first step. So we hear these questions in conference rooms across the country and all kinds of facilities, big and small. Share your concerns, Riaz, and the first step is getting things digitized because blockchain won't exist without that. And I think that's where the focus is right now, and I think the industry is really supporting that. We're even seeing, to your point about how they request and access info, the more they can get access to that through these digital records, they're enjoying that. So they're making recommendations. We're hearing auditors actually ask, do you have a system? You should use X, Y, Z. And so it's going to be interesting to see it unfold. But yeah, getting digital first is a really big step and an important one for the industry, and one we hope to support as well. You've talked a lot about training, and a couple of questions came in, and there's kind of a general question just about types of training programs that are available, and certainly want to ask you. I know you all have some there, so you have recommendations on training in general, and anything that for folks that are listening can dig in a little deeper with you and your team.
Sure. So a couple different ones. Your standard training opportunities that are in the food safety area are absolutely essential. So things like understanding preventive controls, understanding the intentional adulteration regulations, and receiving training on that, those are essential. And our team offers intentional adulteration rule training if anybody's interested in that. And there are programs at numerous universities that offer all kinds of, from simple degrees to week-long certificates to master's degrees to Ph.D. programs in food safety. But where I was talking about is this interaction amongst all the groups. And there are actually not that many programs that talk about how to think broadly and understanding these ripple effects through the food system. And that's where the program that we've created here at the University of Minnesota is a little bit different. We call it the Integrated Food Systems Leadership Program, and it's a 13-month program that's really accessible primarily online, accessible for working professionals. And it really takes you through a lot of these factors from production to regulations to food safety, food defense, and into the business of food to help create a common language and a shared collaboration in this multidisciplinary environment. And then we infuse that with leadership like critical thinking and systems thinking and communication and stakeholder awareness and your own personal leadership style to understand how best to influence others around you. And so that's kind of a unique program that we have available here at the university.
Excellent. And we will make sure and get all of that information out in a follow-up, and actually kind of put a bow on this. A couple of the questions came in. First, couple of very nice compliments to you. So thank you so much, Jennifer. Tons of great content. What I appreciated, we've gotten really tactical on these, and this was such a great way to step back. And we know and appreciate how busy all of you are. We also recognize how important these topics are, and I loved how you connected them. Because there is that interdependency, and you gave us a lot to think about, and really appreciate the approach you took. I encourage everybody to connect with Dr. Vanderlight, her team. They have a lot of great content, and we'll include a link to that, Jennifer, and also connect with her and her team online. And we'll send you some information about that. In addition, to answer the other questions, we are recording this. We're going to turn this also into a nice little content piece that we'll share in the coming weeks or months. So we'll try and distill this down into something that you can review and reference, because I think there was so much really helpful content in there that will be helpful as you get started on working these different topics. So look for those. And we also have all of these. We have an entire library on our website. So if you like this and want to check out some other resources, we make these free and available to everybody. So by all means, we encourage you to go out and check those. And hopefully we'll be able to sneak Jennifer back here and down the road a little bit for another topic. We had bounced around a few, so hopefully we can do that. And of course, if there's any interest in learning more about the technology side, we were just talking about blockchain, and but maybe just get that first step of getting digital in your facility and getting off those paper and clipboards. That's always something we're excited to talk to you and share how we can add some value to your company. So want to thank everybody for making time again, supporting the community, and sharing this. Good questions today, good conversation. And of course, Dr. Vanderlight, thank you so much. It's so awesome to have you join us, and hopefully we can have you back again soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next month.